Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Gritty Hour. I have two very special guests today. This is our first podcast post presidential election in the United States. And I have two special guests on today. They're old friends of mine. Mr. JR McCarthy, who's a longtime teacher at, is it now the Clark Academy?
The prestigious Dr. Kenneth B. Clark Academy.
Yes.
In scenic Dobbs Ferry on the banks of the mighty Hudson River.
And Mr. Rich Del Valle, who until recently was on the board of directors for Salesian High School in New Rochelle.
That's correct.
Yeah. So I wanted to have you on to discuss the possibility of the disassemblage of the Department of Education. I've had a couple of podcasts on this particular topic in the past, and I just wanted to have you guys come on, and which I appreciate you coming on, to just discuss what it might mean for education in general or what it might mean for your particular schools specifically. If it gets, in fact, all of the who's its and was its gets turned back to the state instead of the federal government being involved.
Correct.
So if you guys have anything you want to share, JR or Rich, whoever wants to go first, I'd love to hear what you're thinking about it.
The thing that strikes me the most as we begin this conversation is that in addition to being lifelong friends who were educated together, you two are alumni of the high school where I made my bones, where you two are alumni of the high school where I spent 22 very, very happy and very, very productive years.
Monsignor Scanlon High School.
Monsignor Scanlon High School in the Bronx.
Don't ask us to sing the song, though.
No. Well, if the spirit moves you later on, I can lead you in the song, because I was a jack of all trades at Monsignor Scanlon High School, as you know. We grew up in a time and a place where, especially in the time and place in which we grew up, two very important ideas prevailed. One was that educational institutions took ownership on an individual basis as a matter of pride and as a matter of duty in the quality of students they took in and the quality of students they graduated. And I think the other thing that I want to say is that, to put it mildly, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, there was a tremendous community ethos at Scanlon. Now, that was a Catholic community. That was a parish community. And obviously, there are things that are particular to parochial education that do not obtain in other educational forums. But we had those two things going for us. We had the idea that the entire community was serving and being served by the institution, and that therefore the institution had an especial responsibility not only to produce thinking young men and women, but to produce moral and upstanding young men and women who would take their places in their communities and give as it had been given to them. As usual, and you guys know me well, I'm talking way too much, but this is the thing that struck me the most when I realized that it would be the three of us having this conversation. I would like to submit that once you get outside of the community of vested interest, that's when the trouble starts. So right now, to me, the disassembling of the DOE, regardless of what form it takes and how long it takes, could not possibly hurt the situation, and may help the situation a great deal, because it will remove the movable parts that, fortunately, the three of us were not inhibited by when we were both students and when I was a teacher at that wonderful place.
Actually, it was when, I'm sorry, Rich, it was when we were in high school that they first made the Department of Education a full-fledged
That's
That's
correct.
absolutely right.
cabinet position, and apparently the returns on that have been going incrementally down since they did formulate that position. After we graduated, Rich, we got the top-notch education.
We got
But
yeah.
so
It,
do
it
you
wasn't it
share
wasn't at the,
JR's? I'm sorry. Do you share JR's view in terms of the community aspect as you were on the
yes.
board in Salesian?
Definitely, and I see over the 2000s. So when I was on the board of 2016, 17, I think it was, went on to complete my thing at 2022. The the high school itself started to become a little more frazzled, and that was because they had to do a lot of things that were required by the state or whatever, which is totally different from what a Catholic high school really is all about. And I would say over the last 24 months, we implemented some of the plans to start steering them back into the common sense approach, which was, as you and I, Thomas, when we were in high school, we used to, have a class that would teach you how to use a checkbook, have a class to teach you how to do some woodwork, maybe fix a car.
And
Those
civics as
things
well.
are really just necessary in every young man's life. And I've been coaching young boys for the last 25 years in baseball, and a lot of that has driven me into some of their lives, and what they're all about, whether it's their parents, whether they're single parents, dual parents. And like JR says, it becomes a community because all of a sudden you start to become part of their community. They look to you for advice, they look to you for help. Those are the things that happen, and it has to happen. Unfortunately, it has to happen because that's what that's what time we're in. These
Right.
kids need some help.
Well, JR, Rich mentioned the amount of time that a school has to spend on satisfying. He mentioned state regulations. Do you feel if they disassemble the federal Department of Education and it turns it over to the states, that would amplify? Do you think that would? Do you think like a state such as ours, New York, would be more regulated statewide?
I wouldn't be surprised if New York goes kicking and screaming uh, with whatever decisions are made by the federal government, especially the incoming federal government. But I think, and I would pray that in time they saw that they were holding on to a moment whose time has passed, or a moment the time of which had passed. I think it's a good beginning. I cannot say, and maybe I cannot say because I'm in the thick of it, to what extent we are bedeviled by federal regulation and to what extent we are bedeviled by state regulation.
Yeah.
We're bedeviled by, I've used this term in this conversation with you before, Tom, with unfunded mandates.
Yes.
And not just financially unfunded mandates, but mandates that are very unrealistic, and mandates that would not be passed down by people in good conscience who truly knew the makeup of the community.
Can you illustrate for instance, because you did bring up something
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you one, for instance, that is, Rich, I doubt, I wouldn't be surprised if this was part of the Salesian experience right now, but it could only have been in the last couple of years. I'm in special needs education,
Mm-hmm.
and my students are the common denominator with my students is emotional and psychological disturbance. Now, in the last couple of years, more and more of my students are on the spectrum. And in many ways, there is a wonderful melding when you transition into kids on the spectrum, because the parents of kids on the spectrum tend to advocate. Parents with kids on the spectrum tend to be at least as educated and as informed as anybody else in the room about what their kids need and what their kids are entitled to. But without starting to ramble again, the fact remains that there is still this sense, or there is still this reality, that the school exists to meet the mandated needs of the IEPs of each and every student who enrolls. And IEPs are generated by the state.
What is
but
an
IEPs,
IEP?
an individualized educational program.
Okay.
And it's a legal document that assesses what the kid needs across the board, everything from cognitive and emotional support to transportation and what we call now social and emotional growth, all of these different things. Now, one of the offices in a special needs school like mine is the office of the one-to-one aide, because very often in an IEP, it will be mandated that a child has to have an adult who essentially spends the day with the kid, who goes from class to class with the kid, who stays in the classroom with the kid, who is with the kid pretty much from the moment he gets off the bus to the moment he gets back on the bus. And most of the buses have matrons. So, the kid's not alone on the bus either. Now, in a perfect world, this would be a boon. But they pay these people so little money, and there are so few guidelines beyond the basic, for want of better terminology, criminal guidelines, which is to say, you get fingerprinted, and if your fingerprints don't ding, you're in.
You're in.
Okay. Yeah. It's a terrible job. It's an enormous responsibility, and the pay is lousy. Up until recently, there was no job security to speak of, and even to the extent that there is now some job security, it's a topic for another conversation. But it's benefits that are mandated by the same system that we're talking about right now. They don't do the job, to put it mildly, that they were hired to do. And they can't do the job that they were hired to do. They're undertrained, they're underpaid, they're undermotivated, but they are required. And if the state sends investigators into a school and they're not in the room, the state doesn't want to hear that, you can't find people, that half the one-to-one aides banged in sick today, that we are already in a critical labor shortage across the board in every aspect of education. To me, the one-to-one, to put it mildly, is a position the time for which has passed, and a new reality has to assert itself, and that's not going to happen effectively at a state or federal level. It's going to be a school innovating and solving its problem within its own community, and then maybe being a model of efficiency that other states can follow. I know I say this all the time. You ask me for the time I built you a watch.
That's okay.
This is the one that sticks in my craw.
Right.
More than anything else.
So let me ask you. So the kid gets, I guess, identified as needing the special help. And what happens in higher education when he goes into the next 4 years after high school?
The short answer to your question is that virtually every college in the country has a Department of Special Education.
Okay. And
the presumption is that the IEP, which is a living document, will travel with them into the college environment. And the one thing I can tell you from my own experience is the colleges just are confronted with the same confounding realities that the institution is, that my institution, that the school was, to say institution, that the school is confronted with. It's basically, it's government moving to solve the problem without providing much oversight at all as to whether or not the problem is in fact being solved by this measure, but enforcing this measure, regardless of the very, apt arguments that we can't get enough people to do this job, it doesn't pay enough. We're not going to get people who are particularly well educated. We're not going to get people who are used to working with kids who require an enormous amount of patience from even the most skilled professionals in the field. And yet, they're the front line. They're the people who spend the most time with the kid.
Well, clarify for me something. Either one of you were talking about these regulations, requirements brought forward by the state. Now, is that a pass-through from the federal government? Like, how does it work? Does the federal government mandate something that the state has to enact, and then the state passes it on to, in your case, the Clark Academy, or in Rich's case, Salesian? Or is this drawn up and executed, these regulations, by individual states now?
It starts with the federal government, and then it works its way down. So they probably put the program together and start the law, or whatever, the regulations or whatever have to be done, and then the state, I guess, refines it. New York State.
So right now, Rich, all 50 states have to enact something to satisfy the regulation, but the origin is from the federal government.
Right.
I see.
Another part of that reality is that very often, at perhaps even a municipal level, or even at a district level, an innovation will emerge and then run afoul of federal regulations.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. You guys remember the classroom above the girls' gym at Monsignor Scanlon High School, okay? Which was my classroom for many years, and the classroom of many other legends.
In the boys' gym, right?
Yeah, no, in the girls' gym. Now, there was one over the boys' gym, and there was one over the girls' gym.
Okay.
Gym,
yeah.
And I'm tempted because it's guys who love Monsignor Scanlon High School to intone some sacred names. Okay, and I'm going to hold off on that for a moment. But the city, when I was at Scanlon, the city decided that Catholic school kids were entitled to the same special services, especially for reading, that the public school kids were entitled to, as long as they did not transpire on the grounds of the school, because that would violate the federal standard of the separation of church and state.
Okay.
So the classroom that I was teaching in was known as the music classroom. And there was a great big closet off to the side of my classroom. You may remember this, where music supplies and musical instruments were stored. All the music supplies and instruments were moved out of there, and a couple of desks were put in there. And this lovely lady who worked for the Board of Ed, now this was back when the New York City Board of Education was a separate entity from the state education. She came in, and all day long, kids were coming in and out of my class to meet in that room with her, because it was determined that was sufficiently far away from, I don't know, the chapel, sufficiently far away from the nuns, whatever, sufficiently far away from the Lord, that it would not violate the sacred principle of the separation of church and state for these kids to meet with this girl. And it was ridiculous. But she was a good person, and we worked together as best as we could. And I hope that somebody benefited from it. And it's precisely, again, you get me at the end of a workday, and you guys know I'm a little chatty to begin with, but it's precisely the kind of thing that we're talking about when we talk about the need, if not to dissemble the Board of Education, at least to give localities more latitude to solve their own problems.
Yeah. Because everything isn't going to work.
Right.
one formula doesn't work for everybody,
Right.
unfortunately.
Rich, what do you feel like is the need? What drives the need when something new comes down the pike, a new tactic, a new approach? What's
Well,
fueling that?
I wow, that's I basically think a lot of it is political. Obviously the teachers union has a very strong, you know, iron fist in New York City specifically, and sometimes you just got to take a common sense approach, and I just don't understand some of the things that like I live in New Rochelle, Westchester County, and the New Rochelle High School has given up all of the arts because they don't have any money. And neither does the school in Yonkers, the high school in Yonkers. They give up sports. They've given up arts.
These are
What
public
are these
schools you
kids?
talk about.
Yeah, all these
Yeah.
public schools.
What
What do
about
they
what
do?
about your school, Salesian? Was that
Well,
they didn't give?
Salesian, because it's a tuition based school,
Mhm.
can afford to do drama club and obviously baseball and all the sports. But it is really sad to see some of these high school kids in public schools not being able to participate. And usually, what they do is they wind up turning into a Catholic school or a Baptist school or one of the private schools that are out there.
They
Um,
turn to them to go to them, or they turn to them
yeah,
for those
well, because
particular subjects.
they want to go there because they want to play basketball, they want to play whatever, and it just doesn't work out in the public high schools. So they're forced to go to a place where they can, I guess, instead of just going to school, they basically think, and a lot of kids that I've taught in baseball think that baseball is the way out. Baseball is the way out. And we've taken kids, we're up in Westchester County. We take kids from Manhattan to come up to Salesian because they want to play baseball, not because they want to, not because they want to be educated, but that yet when they're there, they become part of, like JR says, the community. And the community says, you know what? Maybe you should open up your math book every
Yeah.
now and then. And instead of force feeding them, they become, it becomes like a second nature. A lot of the kids that have graduated have come back to the school and either are teaching, go to a 4 year college, come back, and it's really been an eye opener for all of their parents. And one of the things I always remember is one kid that graduated who really had a tough start from the South Bronx, came up, was just really just a nasty kid. When he graduated, he came over, he hugged me, and his father said to me, I brought you a child, you gave me a man. And I never forget that. Never
Hmm.
forget it. And I still see him around. He's actually a record producer now.
Interesting. Well, some of these kids that you say they want to go Salesian, for those who aren't from the New York area that are listening to us, is a Catholic high school in New
Correct.
Rochelle, New York, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Now, did some of these kids, were they all Catholics, or does the
No, some
Salesian
of
have a requirement that?
no, no, there's no requirements. You come in, you can be a Muslim, you can be Jewish. And we've had those kids.
Mhm.
We've had those kids. And there is obviously there's a religious learning to it, but I guess it's more generic, where they don't really push everything on you. Unlike when we went to high school and grammar school, we were taught a certain way, and that's the way you did it.
You
It's
Yeah.
know,
become a little more open now.
Well, one thing that has changed is a lot of the nuns and priests that used to teach when we were going to school, brothers, sisters, are no longer involved in the institution. So the tuition is pretty high for a Catholic high school, at least in the New York area. Did these, some of these parents of the kids you're mentioning, did they just say, screw it, I'm going to find the
Now,
money to
well,
get these kids to?
yeah, a lot of them do, and you could see because I visited a lot of their homes, and you could see that they're basically just making it. But the Catholic high schools have a couple of things. Number one is the alumni. Our school, Monsignor Scanlon, has a very good alumni association, as do all of the other Catholic high schools, whether it's St. Raymond's, Cathedral Prep. They're all doing well. And actually, over the last 5 years, I think they've increased in enrollment. And obviously, COVID pushed a lot of that because Catholic schools were still open during COVID.
Oh, is that right? They never shut down.
Not really.
So there's a limit to the dictates that the federal government passing through the state can put on a Catholic high school as opposed to a public high school or a public school in general?
I don't know. I don't know how they got around the whole COVID situation, because remember that was the city mandate. Like New Rochelle was closed for 2 weeks, and basically we were like point zero here,
I remember
where
that.
we
Yeah,
weren't allowed. We
for a
weren't
short
allowed out.
time, you were ground zero. Yeah.
And finally, everyone said, "You know what? Screw this. We're going." And as it turned out, everything was okay. And the schools, they closed for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and then all of a sudden they just started going back, where they would do half of school would go one day, the other half would go the next day, so on and so forth. And it just became where public schools were just closed.
Everything
And
was
that
online.
that just
Teaching.
was terrible for the
Yeah,
kids.
on a previous podcast, JR mentioned the difficulties of teaching online during
That
that
was
time
terrible.
frame. Yeah.
And you could see it. You could see that 2019, 2020 class just, I mean, it wasn't the same. And some of those kids just really, a lot of them got robbed of just the regular things that happen in high school, whether it's your graduation, your prom, whatever.
And your
Those are things
social
you
development.
remember.
Social development suffered
Yeah.
for most of these
Those are
kids.
things you remember.
Yeah.
You don't take that, you don't just forget about it. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, JR, let me ask you a question. I'm coming from a pedestrian point of view in this, and I'm no expert on this stuff, but I'm just curious about it. You work with, how did you term it? Most of the students are
My students my students have emotional and psychological issues.
right. Do you feel like that's
They are
increased?
ED and BD.
Okay, but since we were in high school, Jay, did you think the number of out of the population, the number of these students has increased over the years, or is this something that is just you have a certain amount of the population that is that?
It's hard to say, because on the one hand, there was a seismic shift that really started while I was at Scanlon and preparing, getting my master's in special education. There was a seismic shift in the attitude that parents had about what was once called labeling students as special needs, and then became designating students to special needs. Parents fought very hard and very long against the stigma of having their children classified as special needs until they saw all the perks that came with being a special needs student, like extended time on standardized tests, getting a standardized test read to you as long as the standardized test did not test reading comprehension. Sometimes getting it read to you even if it did assess reading comprehension. And when people started to see that there were material and obvious advantages to having their children so designated, they started lining up to get their kids designated. And I cannot speak to precisely the way things are right now, but when I first started, when I got my degree in 2000, and when I began to transition from Scanlon, which I left very reluctantly. I loved Scanlon, and long story short, for a while there, I was helping to build a very fundamental special needs education as some more and more of our kids started showing up with IEPs. But then I went in whole hog to what is now, and again, be patient with me. I work in what is called a special acts district, which is our district exists precisely to meet the special needs of kids that other districts, whose special needs other districts can't meet. And one of those needs, and we're going to have this conversation another time because we'll be here all night. One of those needs is residential placement. When I started working where I'm working right now, 90% of the kids were living on the grounds of the school as well as attending the school. Now it's less than 30% because districts are not willing or as willing as once they were to pony up for residential placement. And parents, to their credit, are not allowing their students, their kids, to go into residential placement. And nobody will turn the tide of an IEP more effectively than a parent. If the district says, well, your kid is chronically truant, we think residential placement is the answer. If the kid lives on the campus, the kid will not, and we take responsibility for getting the kid to the door every day. And parents say, no, this is my kid. You're not taking my kid away from me. We'll figure it out, but we're not doing that. Let me just continue with what I was saying. When the paradigm shifted so that special needs education was something desirable, this is also when we're going through DEI, and we're going through social emotional learning and all of these well-meaning programs that are specifically designed to take the stigma out of something that has already been destigmatized by the fact that the people whose opinions were most consequential had, seen the light. I'm crashing here a little bit. The kids that I'm currently teaching, as I mentioned before, are on the spectrum. In the last 10 years, we've been talking about, we're not talking about autism anymore, and we're certainly not talking about Asperger's anymore. We're talking about neurodivergence. We're saying that this is not a condition. This is not even an impediment to learning. It's this kid learns differently than other kids. We just have to figure out how to teach this kid, and this kid will thrive. And in many cases, that is very much the case with kids on the spectrum. But, and I can't say this enough. In the 4 or 5 years that I have been mainly teaching kids on the spectrum, the thing that I've missed for the first 12 or 13 years that I was in the place that I'm in now was parental involvement. And, people I could turn to. And by the way, and people who held me accountable as well. So, just in terms of answering the question you asked me 100 years ago, which is, are special needs, are these conditions more prevalent now than they were when we were kids? I think that what happened was there was a shift in attitude about these things, and then parents who would move heaven and earth to avoid having their kids designated as special ed began lining up to have their kids designated as such. And that, to me, is the main reason why business is booming.
So you mentioned your district is geared towards kids that are on the spectrum. To put
My
it
district,
simply.
my district, well, my school, and there are 4 schools in my district.
Well, this is what I was going to ask
Right.
you. What constitutes a district, and excuse me, districts that aren't geared that way, do they pay per pupil to send them to your district?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And if I quoted you the numbers, you'd be astonished. There are people who a district will pay my school as much money to take a kid as the wealthiest parents in this country are paying to send their kids to the most prestigious prep schools in this country. I'm going to get in trouble if I start naming. The numbers are in excess of $50,000 a kid.
per
And
year.
the school per year, and the school is constantly militating to get more money out of the districts, constantly trying to prove that we're still working on a shoestring budget, even though we're getting from the districts throughout the state of New York, but mostly in New York City, somewhere in the neighborhood of $45,000 to $55,000 a kid.
So
Probably higher than that.
each of the four schools in your district, they're all geared towards children on the spectrum?
You have to have special certification as an institution to accommodate kids on the spectrum.
Personnel, and probably
Yeah.
personnel too.
And there has to be at least, again, I'm tempted to go into this harangue about the dramatic shifts that have taken place in the training of special needs educators. When I got my degree, which was 25 years ago, there was something called a common branch special ed license. It was, you got it, you had it forever, and it made you eligible to teach anywhere they would hire you. Okay, if there was a school for the deaf and you had no background whatsoever in teaching deaf kids or sign language or anything like that, if the school was willing to train you, as long as you had the certificate for special needs education, you were in. And in a lot of ways, that harkens back to something I was saying about Scanlon before. I don't have to tell you guys, my greatest teachers were the people who took me under their wing when I first got to Monsignor Scanlon High School in 1984. Okay. And I had fabulous teachers in high school, and I had a number of really inspiring professors in college. But the teachers who made me the teacher I am are, you know what? Do you mind if I drop a few names, fellas?
Go ahead.
Okay.
They probably taught Rich and I too.
Right.
Yeah.
Rosalie Moralia, Nan Clark, and my dear friend, Bob Doyle.
Bob Doyle, Mr.
Who and Bob Webble and Joe Klein, and I'm sliding people by
Bernie Waters.
And
Donald Kachuba, there's a name.
But you know what? They became dear friends of mine. But the reason they took me under their wing, the reason they gave a damn about what kind of teacher I was, because they loved the school. Right. And somebody had taken them under their wings when they got there, and that's the ethos, through me, not from me. Somebody gave it to me, I'm giving it to you. Now you give it to somebody else.
Does that ethos exist now, Jay, or in your current?
I think in a really good school, regardless of how it answers to district or state or federal government, if you have a group of people who are truly committed to what they do and who have pride in their results, there will be a very organic mentoring of younger teachers by older teachers, by veteran teachers. Yeah. And and I got to, and the people that I spoke of, and that they loved me as much as I loved them, but you also know that they would not allow me to get away with anything. They would not, to be brutally honest, they would not allow me to shame them and to shame the place by doing anything less than what they expected.
They would take it as an insult. They would take it as an insult.
I'm talking on a very emotional level, but that's what it took.
Well, does that ethos exist at a place like Salesian, Rich?
Oh, it does. I mean, you see the kids, the alumni that come back, the teachers, they all go back to the teachers that they had. The young teachers look up to the older teachers, and then they all get intertwined in outside activities. After school activities aren't just for the kids; they're also for a lot of the new teachers and the old teachers to get along and see their students outside of the school. It just becomes one of the things that Don Bosco is. It's a playground for the children, and that's what Salesian's built on.
And you mentioned some of the students you dealt with, Rich, actually went to college afterwards and then became teachers at your school
Yep.
again.
Yep. Yep. I have there's about 4 of them right now.
So that kind of
Right.
community thing fosters that. I'm assuming they, they had a good
And then,
experience.
some of them then go on to either teach in college, they get their masters, they become professors, and it becomes a bigger thing for them. It's just like a stepping stone.
Right.
And we love to see that. It's a great look. It's a great look for the school. So
That was one of the most beautiful things about being at Scanlon, that eventually my former students started coming back.
right.
And they were now my colleagues. And kids would come to me and they would say to me, "I can't call you JR. You're Mr. McCarthy." And I'd say, "You have to call me JR, because that's how it is here. This is how we work together." I say, "Call me Uncle JR if you want, if you can't, bring yourself, but you're not, you're one of us now." Okay. Yeah. And that's how we are. We look out for each other. We hang together. And, it's an honor
But
to be part of that.
well, getting back to the DOE, you sort of kind of alluded to the fact that there's a lot of waste, right? Coming down from the way money is spent, Jay. And the first thing I thought when you were saying that was, Rich was saying in some of the schools of the students that are coming to him, the schools they're coming from don't have after school programs like sports or arts or music or anything like that. So you think that's a crime then if they're wasting money, as you alluded to. I don't think you specifically said it, but that seems to me like a crime.
I'll tell you something along the lines of what you just said. Okay. One of the proudest boasts that we had at Scanlon in particular, and in the Catholic schools of the Archdiocese of New York in general, when I was employed at Scanlon, was that no more than 7% of the employed population of the Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of New York were administrators. Okay. 90+% of people drawing salary were in the classrooms with the kids. When I was at Scanlon, the figure that was bandied around the most about about administration in the city and state schools was 33 to 35% of people, drawing salary from the school, did not encounter children on a regular basis. You start with that.
In what time frame are you saying the 35%?
I'm talking. I started at Scanlon in 1984. I left
Okay.
Scanlon in 2006. Obviously, and Rich will back me up on this, Catholic schools have to recruit.
Yes.
We have to send emissaries to mostly Catholic elementary schools and junior high schools.
Public schools won't allow you in.
Yeah.
The public schools will not allow Catholic schools to make presentations.
Yeah, but we have ways of getting around that too.
Well, I'm glad. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm glad you brought up administrators, because this has been a thorn in my side as we discussed this in previous podcasts. Mm-hmm. The level of administrators, like what would you say the percentage is now as compared to the 30% back then? Or 35%?
I have to say in good conscience that there has been a concerted effort to streamline, if for no other reason than the optics are terrible. Mm-hmm. Okay, the term paper pusher. Okay, the term rubber room. The term lemon dance. Okay, if inferior teachers, for example, to use the lemon dance, okay, if inferior teachers are being regularly shifted out of certain places to other places so they don't do too much damage where they are, somebody is supervising all that shifting.
But why is there so many administrators?
I'm being a little facetious right now. I think that there is a sense that it is possible to generate at the upper level, logistically speaking. What our experience shows can only be generated at the grassroots. Okay. That, if, I can't tell you how many, be patient with me. Okay. 22 years at Scanlon, 2 principals.
Right.
Okay. 18 years at the Clark Academy, 12 principals. Okay. And I promise you, when the first principal began to demonstrate that he was fundamentally incapable of being a principal, they sent somebody from, they hired somebody to come in and work with the guy. Instead of replacing him, they brought in somebody to, make him better, as if, the purpose of the school was to hone administrative talent instead of, getting bad teachers and bad administrators away from kids as soon as possible. Okay. I benefit from a system that protects my rights and doesn't let somebody come in and say, you're no good, you got to go. I would be lying if I didn't say that I benefited from that. But,
Well, I guess what I'd like to know from my point of view, not being in the school system at all, why do they have administrators? What the hell does an administrator do?
What I'm trying to illustrate here is that some administrators oversee administrators.
Yeah.
Right. But what is the administrator? What's the function of an administrator besides the fact that they don't teach the kid?
Well, as it comes to Catholic schools, they have to now have someone that regulates, are they in lockstep with whatever the state rules are? They have to be able to do that. And like Jerry was mentioning, all of a sudden somebody just shows up from the Board of Ed at your school, and if you're not doing whatever you're supposed to be doing, you're going to get in trouble. So you need that person, and then there's obviously the people that are taking some of the spectrum children. I'm going to call them that, for lack of a better word, and they have to watch them, and they have to make sure that those kids are being either okay in their path through that high school, or do they need to go to possibly JR school to get the special education?
So they're essentially the guidance counselors and or compliance officers.
Yeah, but you also have good guidance counselors, and then in some of the better high schools, you're going to have people that guide you through to college, because that's the next step. So those college, I guess, the people that guide you through college are guidance counselors that are really just taking care of the juniors and seniors. And those are the people that are saying, you need to do this for this college, you need to do that for this college, you need to write this, I'll write you a letter recommendation, blah, blah, blah. And that's almost a full-time job.
Yeah.
Listen, I did it for my 2 kids. It is a full-time job finding a college for somebody now.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
But I still don't know what the hell an administrator is. And what are they compliance officers, Jay, or what are they?
There has to be an element of compliance. Just to give you an example from my own experience, and right now, I said it before, and I'll say it again. I give my district credit for streamlining. Okay, there is one superintendent who is in charge of the entire district. She has 2 assistant superintendents. One is in charge of all things financial, including plant maintenance and everything having to do with keeping the books and making sure that the schools have everything they need. And then there is the CSE assistant superintendent. CSE is the Committee for Special Education. The person who was responsible for accepting the paperwork for all the kids who come in, and staying on top of the faculty and the clinicians to make sure that the kids are getting all the services that they're required to have, and that we're documenting that they're getting them. So I mean, I don't see that as being a misallocation of funds. I would say that was necessary. We don't have deans anymore. Okay, we got a principal and an assistant principal. In fairness, when I was at Scanlon, we had a principal and we had one assistant principal for academics and one assistant principal for personnel. And then we had deans who were in charge of the kids. And because we were a coeducational school that historically, as you know, Scanlon was created out of the melding of two, the St. Helena's High School for boys, St. Helena's High School for girls. There was in the beginning this sort of idea that we had to have one dean for the girls and one dean for the boys, but that idea went by the wayside by the time I was there, and there were 3 girls for every boy in the school. So what slowly happened at Scanlon was they began to realize that one dean would do. I couldn't tell you where it's at right now. But, one of the things that and again, Tommy, I'm sorry, I think I'm dancing around your question a little bit. One of the things that has at least become clear to a considerable majority of people involved, especially parents, is that, too many administrators is a bad sign. There is going to be an inverse proportionate relationship between the number of administrators and the level of efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like I said, the dismantling of any administrative structure according to that principle is going to be to the good.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this, when it comes to Catholic schools versus a public school, I mean, the Catholic schools really run it very much, they run it as clean as they can get it. There isn't a lot of overpayment, but, as a taxpayer in Westchester County, I mean, my school taxes are ridiculous.
Well, that's what I was going to say to JR
I
before.
could see what they're getting. And we're sitting here, we can't answer that question. I mean, who knows what these administrators are doing?
Yeah. I was gonna cheekily respond when JR talked about the bad optics of the administrators. You want to see some bad optics? Me writing a school tax check. That's a bad optic.
That's a bad optic, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the new administration has school choice on the board, and they want to give out whatever they want to give out, 5,000,
Hold on one
$7,000
second.
credit.
Can you hold on one
Yeah.
second, Rich? I can
Yeah, sure.
barely hear you for some reason. I'm sorry, Rich. I didn't mean to cut you off,
That's
but
all
go
right.
ahead.
You wanted to
Yeah.
cut me off because
No, I didn't want to
just
cut you
swearing. I was swearing.
I want to get my point out about the school check, writing a school tax check. No, I'm
Yeah,
only
well,
kidding.
but we don't really have an answer as to why all these administrators are out there, and these people are making 70, 80, $100,000, but what the hell are they actually doing?
Well, this
I
is
mean,
this is the real reason I've had all of these podcasts in relation to the education department. Because I don't see the result, like the amount of money that we spend per pupil in this country, getting back to the federal, is way more than any other country in the world does per pupil. But the end result is just not there. I whatever little exposure I have to some of these high school kids in the store here, and I don't want to say now. I don't want to insult anybody, but it's just the standard of education is not where it was when we went to high school. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I would agree with you.
And when we were in high school, people were bemoaning the fact that we were not getting as comprehensive an education as the generation before us, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but the stats, and I've looked this up, the stats since the inception of the Department of Education, which my rather large head is blocking. That's the main building in Washington there behind me. Has incrementally gone down every single year. I believe it was 1978 that it was first. The concept of a federal Department of Education has been around since the beginning of the country, really. but it became a federal item, if you want.
Bureaucracy.
Thank you. Since 1978, and our scores, at least on vital subjects like math, science, and reading, have incrementally gone down to the point where we're near the bottom in developed countries in terms of what the quality of these kids' educations are.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the amount of money that is being funneled in keeps going up every year.
Yeah. You think about the number JR just gave us on some of the, I mean, each student, JR, I don't even know how many kids are in your school, but if you have
About
10 kids,
140.
all right, so do the math, multiply that out by 50,000.
Well, he had mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 4 schools in your district,
Yeah.
Jay, that I don't want to use the word cater to, but are focused on developmentally disabled children, or
Developmentally disabled kids, kids with emotional and psychological issues, kids on the spectrum, kids who are diagnosed as psychotic or schizophrenic.
from how far away or from how far outside of your district do these kids come?
Most of the kids come from New York City, but we have kids who we have kids from Poughkeepsie, we have kids from Wappinger Falls, we have kids from Long Island. You know, it's a pretty broad net, but most of the kids, the majority of the kids, are from the 5 boroughs.
Okay. And universally, they're from the state, right? They're not shipped in from.
Well, it's basically, yeah. We don't have anybody who is not in a state district. No.
Right. Okay.
They presume other states presumably have their own special act schools.
Right. Right.
The surgeon in the Great Monty Python video said, you know, there is nothing wrong with you that an expensive operation will not prolong. You know.
Yeah. Well,
and there it is.
I don't want. It's been over an hour already, but I don't want to hold you men up too long. But I have to ask how you both feel about the prospect of universal nationwide school choice.
I like it.
Because I've heard rumors that it might be coupled with any kind of breaking up of the Department of Education federally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be. You don't have to break it up, but school choice is just so much a better choice, I believe, because I think there's a lot of people that would pull out of public school education.
There is no quicker way to make everybody up their game than to communicate to them that it's a buyer's market. And they're going to be scrutinizing you. They're going to be, you know, looking under the hood. They're not going to just accept what they're given. Okay, being the child of a mother who was absolutely determined to send her children to the best possible school, regardless of the sacrifice that it required. Okay, you know. School choice is a no-brainer. Okay. Of course you want school choice. And if that's what it takes to make everybody more accountable for their results, then so be it.
Well, you both are on the other end of this issue. So I have to ask, besides the obvious teachers unions, is there any other roadblock to why it's not a nationwide option for students and their parents?
I think it's the union. The unions are the biggest issue.
Right. Do you know of any other issue besides the teachers unions?
No, because it's really.
Do you feel like if school choice is allowed, a lot of teachers would lose their jobs? Like teachers in lower performing schools?
Yeah, unless they can come up with some kind of solution, you know, to have the teachers work at a certain school. However, it's going to be under whatever, St. Mary's Academy or, you know, Presbyterian school. I mean, That's a possibility. I just don't see that happening. I don't see the unions giving in.
Yeah, but you're both on the
Randy
Catholic.
Weingarten.
You're both on the non-public side of schooling, and I wonder if that would play out well in a public school setting. Well, actually, JR, you're in a public
There's
school
a
setting.
public school, yeah.
I'm in a public act school. I'm in a
Right.
school that is mandated by government action to meet the legal requirements that districts do not have the resources to meet. So maybe one of the first casualties, if school choice was really and truly enacted throughout the land, is that I'd be out of a job.
Yeah.
Because schools would say, well, never mind sending kids somewhere else to get the things that they need. Let's create an apparatus for providing them with their needs.
Right.
You know.
Well,
Um,
what is your opinion on school choice, Jay?
I've always been in favor of it. I think to a certain extent it's a matter of free enterprise, and I think that it's more to the point a reminder that, and I know this sounds terribly cliche, but the first and best educators of any child are the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to give parents the freedom to be the best possible parents they can be. And God knows there's always going to be lamentable exceptions to that. But to take away any latitude that a parent has to get her kid out of a rotten school and into a better school, for what purpose?
Well, I was going to ask how many.
In the name of what principle? What principle could trump? No pun intended. The principle that you give better. You give to your own kids as much or better than you got yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I mean, and again, I'm going to get paid one way or the other, boys. So
Is that universal, or will there be parents that will pick a school because it's closest and it fits their personal regimen?
Parents are going to make boneheaded choices too. But somebody, you can't. You got to give parents the benefit of the doubt, and I have to tell you, I work with kids who are who come from who have had horrible traumatic experiences. I work with kids who are I mean, it would break your heart to read the things that happen to them. I don't meet too many parents who are monsters. Okay. I meet a lot of parents who have the very best of intentions, but for whatever reason, they're stuck in these cycles of futility, and anything that disrupts the cycle of futility is to the good.
Right.
The world ain't a perfect place,
right?
But everything I am is because of my parents. Mm-hmm. And everything I am to a certain extent is because of my teachers, who my parents held to the highest possible standard.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I turned out pretty well.
Well, it's a couple of weeks after the election as we're speaking. It's actually a couple of days before Thanksgiving as we're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a couple other podcasts on the topic of education. I feel like we got closer to the root of the problem, as I see it, today than we have in the past. But I wanted to get, when it's more fleshed out as to exactly what's going to happen post-inauguration, say. Mm-hmm. Vince McMahon's wife, I think, is going to be. I think the Grand Wizard is going to be involved. But I want to get those other fellas back on in a group podcast when we are all on. We're all more aware as to exactly what direction this is going.
Which way we're going.
Right. I wanted to get you
Sounds
two
good.
guys initial reaction to what I've been hearing, reading about the intentions of the new administration to maybe disassemble the Department of Education, and what ramifications you gentlemen would see if that in fact did occur. So with that said, I do appreciate you guys coming on. I kept you way more than an hour, and I appreciate you being on tonight, fellas.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.
No problem, Thomas.
And we don't get nearly enough time to hang out together anyway.
Absolutely.
correct.
Yeah.
It's
So
always a pleasure to be with you fellas.
so Rich, come pick me up. We're going over to JR's house.
Okay.
And then we'll go to Gerard's.
So I hope you both have a happy Thanksgiving. This will come out after Thanksgiving, but I hope you had a great Thanksgiving.
I hope
And,
that by now I will have had a great Thanksgiving. And
Yes.
I hope that you will have had one too,
And
my brothers.
with your permission, I'd like to have you both back with the other gentlemen, and we'll have a group discussion about what's going to happen in the Department of Education.
It'll be good. Thank you.
All right. So we'll
Thanks,
see you.
Thomas.
We'll see you
All right,
both
JR,
further on
take
up the
care.
road.
Rich, always a pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
All right.
bless.
Good night.